Alright, creating a step 1 schedule. Before I get into how to make a schedule, I want to go over some high yield tips that will help you stick to your schedule. So the first thing to know about sticking to a schedule is that you're going to stick to a schedule that makes sense. So what does that mean? Well, a schedule that makes sense is a schedule that's well thought out. It's methodical. It takes into account how much time you actually need to study a certain subject. Not all subjects are created the same. Biochem is not as high yield as an organ system. So one page of biochem does not deserve the amount of time that one page in cardiology deserves. So a proper schedule will take into account that fact. If it doesn't, it won't be a schedule you stick to, because you're going to realize this when you're studying, and you'll deviate from the schedule then. So a schedule needs to take that into account. Second aspect of a good schedule is it has to be realistic. You're not going to be studying 12 hours a day, even during dedicated. You might be at your desk 12 hours, but in reality, the actual time you're focusing is going to be more, at most, 10 hours. So a good schedule will take into account the fact that you can't focus that for 12 hours. Third, a good schedule will take into account exam days for school, holidays, you want to spend time with family, and days off that you want to spend not studying, or half days off that you want to take the evening off or something. So build these into your schedule and be aware of the days. Otherwise, when you get to them, you're going to end up, celebrating that holiday and feeling like you're behind because you didn't plan it into the schedule. Lastly, start early, finish early. Start before you want to. It's going to suck. Nobody wants to start studying, but once you start, it allows you to finish early. Finishing early has multiple advantages. One, if you get behind your schedule, you have more time to make up for lost time. Second, if you finish early, you can start another resource that you might not have planned to. So I originally I finished about 5 days earlier than I planned to. I thought I was actually going to finish late, but I ended up finishing a little bit early, so I started Cat 1 QBank, which I hadn't planned to do. So I did about half that QBank, which wasn't in my original schedule. So finishing early will allow you to do maybe another QBank that you might not have thought you could get to. And lastly, it can allow you to move your test up if you feel ready. So with that, let's get into the actual schedule. So as you can see, this is incredibly detailed, but like I said, this is important in making the schedule because a detailed schedule will be one that you follow. So as you can see, I've laid out every subject that's in first aid in the order it appears in first aid. And this is how it's divided up. So first aid was kind of the backbone. The other resources kind of filled in. So the good schedule will take into account everything you're going to use. So for me, that was first aid, boards and beyond, pathoma and sketchy, and UWorld or RX. So each subject, I calculated how much first aid pages were in there, how many hours of boards and beyond was there. Now, if you don't use boards and beyond, whatever resource you're using, if you're reading another book, put that in there. How much pathoma sketchy, and then how much UWorld or RX questions were on the subject. Now, just a word of note, in this, I'll warn you that some of the subjects take into account RX, like biochem. I didn't do RX first year, so biochem, I had just 238 RX questions to do on the subject, but I did RX second year when I did cardio block, so I had no RX questions for cardio. So these are UWorld questions. So it's actually italicized, so pay attention to that, because as you see when I calculated, the formula is a little different. For an RX question, I gave a little bit more time for UWorld questions, like 4 minutes per UWorld question versus like 2 or 3 minutes for an RX question, just because the UWorld's much more high yield. That's how detailed the schedule is. So if you see italicized, that means I took into account an RX question. So just keep that in mind when you look at the formula for calculating the total review time. So put in the amount of questions. This may have changed since my year, so just go on the UWorld website. They'll have the amount of questions. Same thing with RX. Put them in. Don't redo RX. Only count the UWorld first pass. Again, these are what I did. You can definitely do something else if you think it'll work. So total video time is just 2 videos, columns added up. Yield factor. This is what I thought each subject deserved compared to the others. So, like I said, biochem, not as important as a organ system like cardio. So, essentially the yield factor says that cardio got a 1, biochem's got a 0.5. That means everything I do for biochem, I'm actually saying I should spend twice as much time for the same amount of material for cardio, just because it's more high yield. It's going to show up on the exam more. How did I come up with these values? Word of mouth, reading on the internet, some of that stuff you saw in the step 1 PowerPoint. I encourage you to come up with your own yield factor if you don't, but not everything is created equal, so this is a way to differentiate that logically. Review time. So this is basically a formula that takes into account everything that we just had here. So you'll see that first 8 pages times 0.33, that's 0.33 of an hour. So that's 20 minutes per first 8 page. Now that doesn't mean I'm staring at a first 8 page for 20 minutes. That means I'm studying that first 8 page in some way. Usually for me it was flashcards. But that's just kind of an estimate of how long it'll take to finish that first 8 page. This is 0.0285 per question. 0.285 hours per question. So this is in hours. So that's for RX because I hadn't done the behavioral science RX questions. You'll notice if you go to something where I'm doing a UWorld question where it's not italicized, there's actually more time per question, 0.057, almost double the time. So I thought a UWorld question deserved double the amount of time to review than an RX question. So just keep that in mind. And the last factor was the video time. So right here, I allotted the total amount of video time times 1.5. So I gave extra amount of time to review the video or whatever. And these are video times at 1 time speed, not 1.5 or 2. If I ended up watching it at 1.5 or 2 times, that just allowed me to have extra time. Again, be as realistic as possible. You want to be safe rather than sorry. If you plan to watch something at 1.5 and then you realize like that's too much, if your schedule is not accounting for that, you're gonna be in trouble. So aim slow, and if you go faster, that's great. So that's review time. Days needed is just the review time divided by an average of 5 hours per day from now until the exam. That's how much I thought I would average. Complete means how much of this block have I done. So if I've done 100% of it, I've done all the 36 hours in it. If I've done 50% of it, that means basic farm 10 hours. I've done 50%, that means I've done 5 hours. Now I should have filled in this column right here, but it's basically the hours left, which is the review time minus the hours 10. And everything is summed up at the bottom right here. So the total review time I calculated last year, 517 hours to study for step. 103 days if you're doing it 5 hours a day. When I last looked at the schedule, I had done 387 hours, which meant I had 130 hours left. There's that. Down here, this is how I calculated how much time I would have to study during the year. So our last block was the GI block. I'm not sure if I actually studied in it, but when I made my schedule, I planned to study in it. So how many days were in the GI block? 17. How many hours did I plan to study per day during that block? 3. So there are 51 hours in that block that I plan to study for step 1. How much of that actually happened? Not sure, but I definitely stuck to the schedule better later on. Winter break was like 20 days, but I was like, I'm not going to work the whole winter break, I'm going to enjoy some of it, so I said I'll do half of the winter break. I'll study 10 days over winter break, and I'll do 8 hours a day over winter break. That means 80 hours. Okay, neuro. I said I'll study 4 hours per day during the neuro block. Neuro block 17 days. That's 68 hours. Same thing with psych. Same thing with ender. Dedicated 18 days with 10 hours. It's 180 hours. Total amount of hours I have to study for step 1, 511. Total amount of time I needed, 517. That was close enough for me. So try to figure out, tweak with the numbers here. It all multiplies together. Tweak the numbers here to get to where this number matches this number. When it does, that's when you're in business. Alright, so time to look at the schedule. So here we are at the schedule. So you can see I have all the subjects laid out. Now the way I did it was that I did a few subjects at a time, so that I wasn't just studying one subject, finishing that subject, going to the next subject, doing that. So I would do like 3 or 4 subjects at a time. So the first 3 subjects I did were behavioral science, biochem, and micro. Highly recommend starting with biochem and micro. Micro is just easy because you can just watch sketchy. Biochem is just, it's not super high yield, and it's a first year subject that you haven't seen in a while, so it's good to start with those 2. Behavioral science, I think I ended up not even studying that, but it was in the schedule. I studied it closer to the exam, I think, but I planned to study it early. So that was the first block. So you can see up here is how many hours I wanted to study during that time. This was, I guess, GI block. It says November 28th. I highly doubt I actually started that early. But I tried to make up for it later on over winter break or something. Like I said, I got better at sticking to the schedule around the new year. So 3 hours. It's broken down by this. The formulas will break it down by the proportion of the block. So the total block time, this block of micro, biochem, and behavioral science will take 116.5 hours to study. But you'll need to spend a little bit more time on micro, a little bit more time on biochem, a little bit more time on behavioral science. So it's kind of broken down to show that. Do you have to stick to it 1.7 hours a day of micro or 0.9 of biochem? No. You can divide it up however you want, but this is just kind of a guideline of how much you should be doing per day. So the thing I had to figure out was, where was I going to reach 100, and I needed to get 116 hours, so I had to figure out how many days it would take to get there. There's no easy way to do this, you just have to figure that out. So just kept going, 3, winter break started, that's when I went to 8. This is maybe like a travel day, right here, December 16th, and then I figured out that at this point, just kept looking at the sum, that would be 118 hours, which matched the 160.5. Okay, so that's how much that is. So just make sure these numbers really don't matter here, but make sure the 118 matches the 116.5. The amount of time you have allotted for the block and matches the amount of time it'll take to study the block. Again, where did this number come from? It comes from the these numbers right here came from the previous sheet over here, and they're kind of set into here. So just be aware of that. And then this is a total of that. Alright, same thing for the next block. Guess I took a break right here, and then started with the next block. Immuno, path, basic farm. That's just how it's ordered in first aid, and I really liked going in that order too. Thought it was pretty simple. Again, 4 hours, 8 hours, 8 hours. School started back up, 4 hours, 4 hours. 44 hours for this block, which matches exactly how much time it takes to need, how much time you need. So just keep that in mind. Also keep in mind up here that when I calculate the time in a block, it does not just skips a day. So this is the 7th. This is not a real day. This is the 8th. Just look at that. These little purple boxes meant that I'm starting a new block. Actually, they don't mean that. That's not even purple. That's orange. These orange boxes were group study days I had with my roommates. Most of them didn't pan out, but they were put in there for that purpose. So you can put stuff like that in your schedule if you want a group study or you want a half day off or something. Put it in there and mark it. So the next block was HEMOC, MSK, breast. Same thing. Exam there. Make sure I put the exam. Group study day here. Not sure why these are all 0. I think somewhere along the line it got messed up. But you get the basic concept. Most important thing is to calculate how much time you're going to spend in a block by putting the amount of time you have per day here. Make sure on an exam day you put 0 because you're not going to be studying an exam day. Track like when dedicated started. Track like when you're going to have maybe it's a weekend and you want to say I'm going to study for step more on the Saturday. Put that in. Do that for everything. Alright? And then for every subject, then look, I finished March 17th. My exam was actually April 10th. So, like I said, I plan to finish 3 weeks ahead of time. And this is, when I say finish, that means finish going through the material. Now, when I went through the material, I was also doing the UL questions. I was looking at keeping up with flashcards, doing all the reviews for the flashcards. So by the time I hit the 17th, I felt that I had a very firm understanding of everything, and I've been doing questions. So from the 18th to the 10th, what I do, I did my year world marked, which was about 1,000. I marked a lot of stuff. Anything that I thought was even slightly unclear, I marked. So I had a lot of mark to do. I did half the Kaplan Key Bank. I did the NVMEs, the U-World Self-Assessment. So finishing 3 weeks early, I think is a good amount of time to just hammer in questions. So from here on, I just did flashcards and questions. Wasn't looking at, I had done all the material, wasn't seeing anything new, just doing questions, questions, questions. That's huge. So questions. Third tab. Here you see, put in your test date. This will automatically track today. This will tell you how many days till the test day. Alright. This will put in how many questions you have left for eWorld. How many you have left. Estimate how many you're going to have on a second pass. How many RX questions you have left. How many Kaplan ones. Or whatever other key bank. How many practice tests. Practice tests will be calculated. Put them in here. So Kaplan, it's like a full test. So put in how many you're going to do, put in how many MVMEs, put in how many UWorld self-assessments. So automatically creates a formula for here. So it'll add, this will add 7,600. That's a lot. This is just an example. I don't know if I actually did all this. Did pretty close to this amount. Up here, is the amount of questions divided by 40. That's how many blocks of 40 you have left. This tells you how many blocks you have to do per day to finish every block by the exam date. So 192 over 125, so 1.5 a day. Very reasonable. This I just put in to keep track of your score. So your cumulative score in your world. It does it anyway for you on your world, but maybe you want to see a better, nicer graph. So just put in your scores here. This last tab is just a checklist of videos. Didn't really use it, but this is the way you can. This is Boards and Beyond. I just copy and pasted it from their webpage, and it pasted right neatly into this, and you can, mark it as done, or mark it as I need to review that again, or mark it as like haven't watched it yet, or whatever you want to do. That is basically it. Feel free to contact me with any questions, anything that was unclear. I know this is pretty detailed. Hope you watched it at double speed. But I wish you all good luck. Don't forget, it's all about the method. Step 1 score is in everything. But it's important. So if you can get ahead of time, be efficient. Best way to be efficient is a good schedule. So encourage you all to do that. Alright, thanks.